Okay, breaking news this morning, just hours ahead of tabling her government's fall economic statement, and Finance Minister Freeland has resigned from Justin Trudeau's cabinet.
Yeah, this is a huge story we're following so closely. Let's bring in CTV's Colton Prale, who's live in Ottawa. Colton, what kind of reaction are you seeing to this? I mean, I know this just came down a few minutes ago.
It did. Certainly, there's been rumor and reporting around Ottawa for weeks now that there has been immense discord between the finance minister's office and the prime minister's office. And as recently as Friday, we heard from the deputy PM, from the finance minister, Freeland, saying she doesn't pay attention to those Ottawa rumors. Well, today, in a public letter, she announced that she had been asked on Friday by the prime minister to no longer serve as the finance minister, and that another cabinet position would be open for her. Instead, she is resigning from his cabinet, saying it's clear that she has lost his confidence and the authority to operate that comes with that. She also acknowledges that the two have been at odds for weeks over what she calls the direction and what is best for the future of this country. In a fairly lengthy open letter, she goes on to detail some pretty grave concerns about the tariff threats posed by Donald Trump and the need for Canada to prepare itself. She writes about keeping our fiscal powder dry, ensuring that our country has the reserves necessary for a tariff war should one come up. She goes on to say that she's put forward a strenuous effort to manage the spending, to give us flexibility as a country. What you really gather from this letter is a story of two very contrasting viewpoints, not only on what's best for the country, but on how to deal with these tariff threats. There is one line that is particularly pointed where she says that we need to eschew political gimmicks that the country can ill afford. The rumors around Ottawa for the past several weeks has been that there has been significant discord, significant disharmony when it comes to the new spending we're seeing in the fall economic statement, when it comes to policies like the GST tax relief and the $250 checks that were promised for working Canadians, policies that economists across the political spectrum have been incredibly critical of because while they deliver minute relief in the short term, really they are not particularly helpful for the majority of Canadians, certainly for the Canadians who might need that money the most. They're mostly political vote garnering tools. And so what we're seeing here is that being laid out in a much more public forum. And this becomes very significant for the Prime Minister because not only is he losing Freeland, on the same day he's losing Sean Fraser, one of the best communicators in that cabinet, but it comes after losing a number of other fairly high-profile cabinet ministers. Randy Boissonnault is gone. Pablo Rodriguez, his Quebec lieutenant, is gone. Marie-Claude Bibeau, who handled national revenue, is gone. Dan Vandal, who handled Indigenous relations, gone. These are significant posts that have all left in the last number of months. And it's clear that when this next cabinet shuffle comes, and it's going to need to come relatively soon, just given the number of positions to be replaced, it's going to look very different. It's going to be very telling about the future direction of this government. And it's going to be very interesting to see if Mark Carney is the man who comes in and steps in and takes over that finance role, especially given the discord we're seeing here and the rumors and the framing around Ottawa that what PMO is looking for is someone to greenlight their plans rather than to push back on new spending.
Colton, we're really tight on time. I just have to quickly ask you, is there any sense of who will read the economic statement this afternoon? At this point?
It's expected at this point that it will still be Freeland. She's supposed to be giving an embargoed lockup at 2 o'clock that we will then hear from her later on at 4 o'clock. But at this point, that remains to be confirmed.
Okay. Colton, thank you so much. We're obviously going to be in touch with you as the day continues because this is a huge story, the story of the day now. We're going to move on now to talk about this news out of Ottawa and bring in our political commentator, Scott Reid. Scott, I mean, you can probably get a sense of even how surprised we are. This broke at a time when we saw Sean Fraser announcing that he was resigning, stepping away from the housing portfolio. What did you think when you heard this news?
Well, it's an extraordinary act. Freeland's decided to release this letter as she set to release the fall economic statement during the departing news comments of her colleague, Sean Fraser. Nothing about this is unconscious. Nothing about this is indeliberate. This is an aggressive move by Freeland. And, to Colton's last point, I'd be shocked if she delivered the fall economic statement today. I do not have a smart answer as to who will or how it will get delivered or whether it will be delayed, but I don't know how your finance minister can say, I am resigning. The reason I'm resigning is that you wish to push me out of finance and I don't wish to go. And by the way, I have a number of fundamental disputes with you when it comes to how our finances should be managed and how our arrangements with the United States and our pushback on Trump should be directed. I just don't think that you can say, all right, please just complete the day's work and then we'll call it quits after that.
Yeah, that seems pretty shocking. And you talked about the strategy behind the move and the timing of this. I mean, and Scott, you're very familiar with bad blood between a prime minister and a finance minister. I mean, we all know your origin story here. This takes it to a different level, right? I mean, this is like sort of fairly unprecedented just to come out like this, but then say, I still want to stay with the party. I still want to run again. Mm-hmm.
I found that very interesting, her commitment that she was going to seek the nomination in her home riding again. So it's an indication that while she's going to leave the finance portfolio, while she feels very much aggrieved and alienated with the prime minister and PMO, that's the only way to interpret her letter, that she does feel aggrieved and alienated, but nevertheless, she wishes to remain in politics. There's a hint of a challenge there, if I can be so bold. And there's a hint that she wishes to push back in some lasting fashion by maintaining her position. I mean, let's cut to the quick. The government is in disarray. You have two ministers, one somewhat unexpected, one entirely unexpected, resigning on the same day. The fall economic statement, its economic program and plan that it wished to present to the country, is now in disarray. And the question as to who and how this cabinet is going to maintain itself is in disarray. Mark Carney may be behind some of this. It may be that they wish to bring Mark Carney in, try to reassert control and establish some new stability. But my God, what a horrible situation to walk into if you're Mark Carney. It looks like you were the instrument that was used to force out Chrystia Freeland. It's just a meltdown mess.
I'm also wondering, Scott, about the timing of this, because in the letter from Freeland, it says it was on Friday she was told by the prime minister they no longer want her to serve as the finance minister. But we knew this economic update was coming for a while now. So what could have been happening behind the scenes if the prime minister said on Friday, OK, you're out on this portfolio, we'll move you into something else? Who do you think he would have been planning to deliver this update then without us even knowing?
Well, the working assumption is that Mark Carney was going to be coming in, but I suspect that the prime minister's plan and program that he put forward to Chrystia Freeland was she would complete the job of delivering the fall economic statement, and then later this week there would be a cabinet shuffle and she would be moved to another portfolio. Look, I think the mention of the Friday conversation really hints at the depths of the aggravation that's happening behind closed doors. It appears as though the prime minister sat down with Chrystia Freeland, his finance minister, on Friday and said, I'd like to take away your job, but I wouldn't mind it if you completed a few of these critical duties prior to that departure. Mm-hmm. And she took the weekend and said, no, that's not good for me. And the fact that they hadn't anticipated the possibility that Chrystia Freeland would refuse to be moved, or that she might take issue with it, or that it could bubble into this kind of political crisis. And let's be clear, this is a political crisis for Justin Trudeau. The fact that none of that had been contemplated, anticipated, or that there are contingent plans in place, I mean, that's a really damning statement about how the prime minister and his office are directing things at present.
Okay, so communications-wise, you were in the PMO, you were Paul Martin's communications guy. What do you do? What do we expect to hear now from Trudeau today? I mean, you said it, disarray, crisis. This is not going to be a good day for Justin Trudeau.
Well, the number one rule is in a crisis, you want to assert control. So you need to see the prime minister, and you need to see him promptly. He needs to issue a statement and take questions from reporters. He needs to stare this down and talk about how he's going to be taking control. So will he delay the fall economic statement? Will he have it presented in the House by someone else, another minister, himself? I personally think that those are all impractical, improvised options, but he needs to talk about how he's going to move forward, when there's going to be a shuffle, how he's going to reassert control. There are no good options available to the prime minister today. This looks as bad as it is, and this is as bad as it looks. He's going to have to take control, and he doesn't have hours to do it. In a situation like this, you need to move with real speed. Mm-hmm.
And in this letter from Freeland, she also talks about how the country faces a grave challenge with this threat of tariffs from President-elect Donald Trump, and saying we need to take that threat extremely seriously. I'm wondering what your take is on that wording, and if that suggests to you that maybe the Prime Minister isn't recognizing how seriously these threats are toward our country.
Yeah, you don't have to read the letter terribly carefully to see that there is a real sense of pushback on the part of Freeland with respect to the government's overall approach toward tariffs. And she links the positioning vis-a-vis Trump, how the government responds to the challenge of Trump and tariffs. She links it to the fall economic statement and to the fiscal tract. She talks about that her efforts to control spending are presented in order to give the government latitude and flexibility to respond. And the implication, therefore, is that she's being pressured to spend less wisely, more recklessly, and that doesn't just put at risk rather the fiscal track, but in her view, it puts at risk our ability to respond as well and as strong as we might to the threat of Donald Trump's tariffs. You don't have to read between the lines to see that this is a real direct challenge to the Prime Minister.
Okay, so Scott, last question here. If you're Pierre Poilievre, 15 to 20 points ahead in the polls, looking like he's cruising to be the next Prime Minister, what do you do today? Do you just sit there and let the Liberals dig their hole, or do you come out and say something?
When your opponent is in the middle of dismantling himself, you do not jump in with a Phillips screwdriver. I expect that he will issue his typical statement saying that this is just more chaos. This is an indication that the government needs to be replaced and an election should be held. It'll feel like rote. He'll issue that statement, and then if he's wise, he will go fishing, because there is no point. There's nothing he can do that improves his circumstance. He should just sit back and watch the fire burn.
Okay, Scott, I feel like we're going to have a few more things to talk about when you visit us tomorrow morning here. I guess we're doing it virtually tomorrow, but got a lot to talk about in your regular Tuesday morning segment here on Breakfast after this resignation of Chrystia Freeland, Sean Fraser, the fall economic statement. Who says it? Who reads it? Lots to get to tomorrow.
Have a good day, guys.
Yeah,
thanks,
a long one.
Yeah,
it could be. Yeah. All right, that's
Thanks,
Scott Reed, political commentator.